Hello, everyone. My name's Chad Billington. We've gone live a little early just to give some time for people to join the conversation. So we're not going to be starting our actual discussion for about 3 minutes. If you're watching this after the fact, you might want to scroll to about 3 minutes in if you're watching this after we've started today, because we're just giving time for people to join. So I'm glad you're here. I see that we've got a couple people who've joined us already. And we're just going to be starting in about 2 minutes. While we wait for others to join us, I just want to share a couple of pieces of information. At the end, we're probably going to have a chance to take a few questions. So if you have a question, I've shared my personal email, chad@ssc.church. And if you have questions about this, you can still direct them to me even after the webinar is done, and I'll do my best to gladly get in touch with you about your questions about the policy. Also want to let you know that the proposed changes we're going to talk about can be found right in the link I'm sharing as well in the comments. There's a link right there that you can use. And if you're looking, pardon me for looking around because I'm using multiple screens right now to get us ready for our webinar today. If you want to look at our present policy for discussion or for your own reference, I've also shared that link right here in the comments so you can get your hands on that as well. Now, perfect. So we've got about another minute or so before we get going. I see that we've had a number of people join us today. It's great. Glad that you're here to join us for the discussion. If you feel free to comment or like things. If you give me hearts, it'll make me smile during our discussion, but that's not necessary at all. And so we're just going to give it a couple more minutes for people to join. I see we're up to about 8 people now. Hi, Al. Glad that you've made it here with us today. I know Darla's here. Some of you are popping up on my list as the people we're seeing. Glad to have you here. All right, just going to give it another minute or so, and then we're going to kick off. If you're just joining right now, welcome. We're going to be discussing the ACOP Presidential Election policy today. If you look in the comments section, I've already posted a couple comments, and you can use these after the video today as well to take a look and see what on earth are all those emojis? You can take a look at those things to see our present policy, and you can also go online and get a copy of our proposed policy changes, which is what we're going to be discussing here today. If you do have questions, just so we don't fill up the whole feed with questions, I'd encourage you to email them to me. My email again is chad@ssc.church. That's for Smythe Street Cathedral, ssc.church. And at the end of the webinar, I'm going to take a look over there, see if any questions have come in, and try and answer any that we have time for today. All right. Well, another 30 seconds and away we go. Well, as I said, we're here today. Welcome all of you. If you're just joining us, we're going to get underway. We're discussing the presidential election policy for the ACOP. And you might wonder why it is that we're talking about that today. And I just want to give you a little bit of history as to why the trustees are looking at making a change in our election policy and how it is we aim to do that. We've had a lot of change in our leadership structures in the past few years. You think of, it wasn't that long ago that we didn't have the same Canadian leadership team we have now. We have our apostolic team. And it seems that the significance of the presidency is really important in our structure, especially as it's evolved over the past few years. In addition to that, we also got some feedback from some of our districts. At the last time we were looking for nominations, they said, it seems that our policy, although it has worked very well for us in the past, it seems a bit loose. And sometimes the election of the president does not get the attention it deserves. Often people will show up to a district meeting and say, oh, our district has got to give a nomination for the president. And people didn't have a lot of time to prayerfully think about that and give honor to the office and what it represents for us as a fellowship. And so some districts are saying, you know, we'd like to have a little more time and a little more thought. And this feedback initiated some discussion amongst our leadership and amongst the trustees as to how it is we could go about finding a way to improve our presidential election policy. So what we did is we struck up a committee. There were a number of us from the trustees, and we had Rod Barks as well from the A-team, and Wes Mills was there because he had some understanding of what it's like to be inside the actual election process himself. And we said this would be a good time to look at this because we don't have an election coming up in the short term. It's best not to make changes when you're in the middle of an election. And so we decided we'd take a look at it with two great goals as our aims for changing the policy. And the first one was that we wanted to look at different models of elections, which we did from different organizations. And then we wanted to take what we learned to craft something that would do two things. One, we wanted to create a process that would really empower and validate the significance of the grassroots. We wanted people at the very foundations of our organization, all our members, to feel like their voice was heard and was significant. And then also we wanted to create a policy and a procedure that would help us to honor the office of the president, so that we would be able to say, we've given our due diligence and our thoughtfulness in pursuing how it is we go about electing our leadership. And after we did some study and a lot of discussion, we went through a number of drafts, we came up with a policy that you can actually download in the link I shared in the comments. It's right here, our directors and officers policy. And this past November, our trustees said, we feel good about this policy. Now, just so you understand, the trustees are the body that is responsible for policy. They have the power to make changes on this on their own. That's what their elected responsibility is. However, given the nature of how significant the election of the president is, the trustees said, we want to put this out to the membership and we want to receive feedback on it from our membership across the board. So that's what this webinar is for today. At our general conference, we're going to be presenting this. It's not something we're going to vote on because it's not policy is not something that's voted on by the general membership generally, but we are going to be inviting feedback to make sure that we have a sense as to how the membership feels about this proposed policy. So if you have the policy in front of you, you can follow along. If you don't have it, I'm going to hit the high points as to what it is that we've done with this policy. And just say hello. I see a lot of you joining, and glad you're here today as well. So here's how we basically come to things. Is first of all, something that's new is we ask if there's an incumbent president. For example, presently it would be Wes Mills, but it could be anyone else. When we come up to an election, the year before that election, the incumbent has to declare to the trustees in September of that year whether they're willing to let their name stand or not. Just because we think it's important for the membership to understand that the incumbent is willing to serve another term or is not willing to serve another term, because that opens up what our possibilities are and understandings of what we might want to do. And then after the president has made that declaration to the trustees as a nominating committee then circulate what we're calling a nomination ballot to every member who's a voting member of the ACOP. And what will happen is you get a ballot, and that'll say you have the power as a member to nominate any qualified member to serve as a president. Now you say, what qualifies someone to serve as a president? In our policy, it says that the member has to be a member in good standing, that they have to be ordained and have credentials, and have been licensed or ordained for a period of at least 5 consecutive years. So it's to make sure that people have got a bit of a history in the organization, as well as making sure they're in good standing. You can't nominate someone from outside the ACOP to be our president. We want people to have a reasonable knowledge of being a part of our fellowship. So as a member, you will receive this nomination ballot, and then you'll have until the 3rd week of October to have returned your nomination ballot, by which you say, I nominate whoever you think would be the best president for the ACOP. Now, we specifically did not say if we're going to mail these ballots or if we're going to use certain methods, because technology is so rapidly evolving and changing that we did not want to handcuff anybody to using a particular type of technology. So we left that at the discretion of the trustees at the time to best figure out how to circulate that information around. All right, so then what happens with those nomination ballots? And I'm just going through my notes here to make sure I have everything right here. What happens is, first of all, if we have an incumbent president and that incumbent president receives 66% of the nomination ballots completed, basically as a vote of 66% of the nomination ballots, we would just consider the election concluded, and we'd bring his name forward or her name forward to the next general conference for ratification by the members. There's not a real great point in having a big election procedure if 60%, 66% of all those who respond say this is who we want for our president. So we move forward. If that threshold is not reached, or in a year that there's not an incumbent president, then what happens is when all those nomination ballots are returned back to the nominating committee, which is set up by the trustees, the top 3 people who have been nominated by the most people are automatically placed on the election ballot if they are willing to let their name stand. So automatically those top 3 will go on the ballot. Now, we have also left it open to say there can be a maximum of 5 names on the ballot. And we did this with some intention. The thought is that there could be a very qualified person who almost was one of the top 3 or might not have quite the national recognition, but has the credentials to say this would be a very good candidate that was recognized by a number of people. So the nominating committee does have the power to have up to 2 more people placed on the ballot, but that's not necessarily required. In our experience is that we would rarely have that many nominees on an election ballot, but we want to leave flexibility for the future because there could be a time that we'd want to see that happen. So then what happens in January of that year, the nominating committee will then let the entire membership know, here are the names of those who got enough nominations to be on the ballot and who we're going to be voting on at the next general conference. So that's what happens the January before the general conference would happen. So let me just review in case some of you are joining late. The incumbent president declares if he's going to run or not. The nominating committee, which is the trustees, circulates that information to all the members, and each voting member gets a nomination ballot. They then use that nomination ballot to nominate anyone they think is qualified to be the president of the ACOP from within our membership. And if the person's qualified, those ballots are all counted. The top 3 people are offered the opportunity to run in the election, and then there may be up to 2 more people placed on there at the discretion of the nominating committee. And then in January, we inform everyone as to who those names are, and we'll have some information just so everybody can get to know who they are. It's the trustees or nominating committee's job to inform everyone as to who these people are in case they're not known in one part of the country more than another. And then when we arrive at our general conference, it'd be very similar to what you'd see today. We'd have a vote until one of the nominees receives an election with 50% plus one of the ballots cast. And that's how we'd receive our new president, and that's how it would go. So that's the bulk of it. I'm just going to double check my notes here. I thought I had one more page, but I think I've concluded it here. Yeah. So we think this is a decent and really good way because, one, it informs the membership of who the candidates are. There's a lot of time to prayerfully consider before you arrive at election, but we also want to make sure that every person's voice gets heard. If you're a voting member of the ACOP, you have got more say in helping choose who our next president is, and we think it gives people time to honor and prayerfully engage with the process. All right, so we've been on for just a few minutes now. We've been about 10 minutes into this. If you have a question, this is a great time to pop it out there. So if you could pop me an email really quickly at chad@ssc.church. I've got my email app open right over here, and I'd gladly take a peek at any questions we'd like to circulate. I don't have any questions as of right now. If you joined a little bit late, I would let you know that in the comments, we do have links to our present presidential election policy, and we also have a link to our proposed presidential election policy. So I'm going to check for a question. You're a quiet group today. I have no questions. It's a little easier. I could probably handle a question in the comments section. Oh, Dave, I'm very pleased to take the time for this today. I just want to say we're We wanted to have a webinar like this. This is probably something that's going to come up in discussion maybe at district meetings in the next little while in your area. And we just want to make sure before we get to general conference that people have a chance to look this over, consider it, ask any questions they have, just because it's if you throw all this out on the floor of a general meeting with no chance for people to look at it, we don't want any confusion, and we want you to know why it is we went pursuing something like this. All right. I'm still not seeing any questions, so I'm not going to prolong our webinar much longer unless somebody has something else. You're very welcome, Brandon. Great. Well, as I said, this video is going to be posted. If you have questions about our policy or the proposed changes we have towards it, please feel free to email me, chad@ssc.church. I'm one of the trustees, and I've been working on this with the other committee members. Big thanks to them. Rod Barks was part of that, and I'm trying to think, doing this off the top of my head, it was Al Huckabee was also part of that, and Wes and myself. Thanks so much for being a part of the discussion in helping revise our new policy, along with the other trustees who gave us lots of feedback on our early drafts. We went through a number of models and thoughts as how till we got to this one, and we feel really good about this one today. So if you don't have any further questions, we're going to let it go. Thank you. Have a very great day. Feel free to share this video with your friends, and we're looking forward to seeing what God might do in our future. Looking forward to seeing you at General Conference as well. God bless. Have a great day.